Hello, good day. Thank you for joining us, honorable guests from the USA and those joining from around the world. I am pleased to welcome you to Global Compact Network USA's side event on equity and inclusion for the SDGs during the 75th anniversary of the UN and the 75th United Nations General Assembly, and the first day of Uniting Business Live from the United Nations Global Compact. Today, we have seen an unparalleled program of speakers, including the opening session of the UN General Assembly, as well as private sector leaders from across the world. The UN represents our collective international commitment to global peace and prosperity. And as the commitment from over 1,000 corporate leaders this morning reinforces, global cooperation and multilateral institutions are critical to overcoming global challenges. And we face immense challenges at this moment. On this day when New York should be overflowing with leaders of the world, with Midtown traffic at a near standstill, the near empty General Assembly Hall this morning on our screens is a palpable reminder of the challenges we face. But we remember that the world has faced seemingly insurmountable challenges before, and we must remember that the world has overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges before. As representatives of the private sector, we must support the United Nations and the collective ambition of the SDGs. Together, the whole world, through the UN, has outlined our collective ambition for a more sustainable, more equitable world. We have the KPIs. It is incumbent on business to do what it can to support their achievement. And this is not limited to the international work and to what our impacts are over there, wherever it is our supply chains touch and the foreign markets in which we have an impact. Each country has an opportunity to improve its performance domestically as well. We cannot achieve the SDGs without such domestic ambition. Sustainable and equitable development must begin at home. In the USA, we have ample room to improve our performance. Climate change, gender equality, anti-corruption, racial and ethnic inequality, and more. The USA can and must improve. American business, like those around the world, cannot wait for government to solve its problems. In fact, this may be the most American thing about this moment. Business, free enterprise, will contribute to the achievement of a better world because it is, without a doubt, good for business. This is very much true of the topic of this side session today. The United States of America was founded in 1776 on the promise of government by and for the people. The world as a whole has benefited immensely from our contributions, and our business contributions have always been world-changing. But at the same time, this country was founded on the back of slave labor, based on race, and we live with that legacy to this day. Racial and ethnic inequality permeates this country, and much like our founding, we live daily with the duality of being both equal and unequal. SDG 10, in fact, directly outlines our global ambition as it relates to our very American challenges. SDG 10 states that we must reduce inequality within and among countries. Specifically, it outlines how we must achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of our domestic population, how we must empower and promote social, economic, and political inclusion, how we must ensure equal opportunity and reduce inequalities of outcome. We must adopt policies, especially fiscal, wage, and social protection policies to achieve greater equality. And we must improve the world of financial markets to strengthen the implementation of equality. At the UN Global Compact, we believe that business must not just support the SDG ambitions, but business must show leadership in the ways only business can. We cannot achieve the SDGs without business leadership, and this is as true with racial and ethnic inequality as with each of the other SDGs. We cannot achieve the SDGs unless we ensure that Black lives matter. The Global Compact Network USA contribution to Uniting Business Live is designed to promote inclusion as a critical component of the SDGs and encourage you to take up your work on combating racial inequality through the lens of the SDGs. As the US private sector more meaningfully and more deeply invests in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in response to the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and sadly, so many more, we challenge you to think more holistically about your impacts beyond the human resources function and to do so through the lens of the SDGs. Please consider this side event our introductory remarks on the topic. We look forward to continuing our efforts to support this national conversation from the perspective of the private sector. And we look greatly forward to welcoming those corporate speakers who wish to speak candidly about the opportunities and the challenges in corporate engagement on this topic through our platform with Global Compact Network USA. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon for this perhaps difficult conversation. We'll start with a keynote from Mr. Mark Morial, President of the National Urban League, and continue with a panel on how to support a more equitable talent pipeline beyond the confines of human resources to ensure that business is supporting our national promise to be a country by and for the people. But first, it is my honor to welcome the Board Chair of Global Compact Network USA, Richard Pearl, VP Corporate Responsibility Officer at State Street Corporation, for his opening remarks. Rick?
Thanks, Adam, and welcome everyone. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the Global Compact Network USA's event on equity and inclusion. As Adam noted, I'm the current chair of the local network's board of directors, and I'm proud of the work that we've all done to develop events and programming such as this to help engage our members and help address some of the major challenges that we collectively face. Before I go any further, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our current board members, Val Smith, who's our vice chair from Citigroup, Grady Crosby, who's our secretary from Johnson Controls, Evan Harvey, the treasurer from NASDAQ, Chris Gray of Pfizer, Liz Formenard of Johnson & Johnson, Danielle Foster of Bayer, Chris Wellis of HPE, Ann Tracy of Colgate-Palmolive, Jennifer Leitch of CBRE, and John Weiss of Ceres. As Adam noted, the U.S. network represents a lot of different organizations, including among them large corporations, small and medium enterprises, NGOs, and institutions of higher learning. Collectively, we have an unparalleled influence on our world. By using the frameworks of the Global Compact's 10 principles and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we can lead the way to positive change. Today's topic is one area where much more work needs to be done, as Adam mentioned, in society as a whole, and certainly here in the United States. But what we can focus on here today is within our own organizations as well, and how our own organizations can help to influence this in a positive way. At State Street, we recently issued our 10 commitments to racial equity and social justice, championed by our CEO, Ron O'Hanley, but in collaboration with our Global Chief Diversity Officer and my colleague, Paul Francisco. Among the 10 goals are some that you might anticipate from an HR perspective about increasing diversity on our staff as well as our board, but also I think important other areas that each company or institution touches, such as procurement, community support, and most importantly in the businesses that we all do. And so as one of the world's largest financial services players and institutional investors, we have a way to influence as an asset manager and asset steward and along these lines, particularly as we see that it is a value play, not just a values play. As Adam noted, SDG 10 fits squarely in this place, and it can be a key performance indicator in this work for all of us. He noted the language in SDG 10, and it really is applicable for us in this matter and all the matters that have come to fore over the course of the last several months in the United States. One of the things that I'm reflect upon as I'm about to introduce our keynote is that the Urban League, the National Urban League, have been a true champion of these ideals over the years. My first boss at State Street nearly 20 years ago was a gentleman named George. Was a pioneer in financial services, particularly in Boston, which for those of you who have been know their history, Boston has been an area of racial unrest and doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to these issues. George broke through and was one of the first African American executives in Boston many years ago, when it was not the easiest thing in the world to be a black man in Boston, especially in financial services. Well, George taught me a lot about working and surviving in the corporate world, and I owe a lot to him. He is and was my best boss. He was the chair of the local Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts for 6 years. And so I learned a lot about the Urban League through his work and supporting George and attending many of the events that he attend. So it is really an honor for me to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mark Morial, who is the current president of the National Urban League. You may know Mark. He was the mayor of New Orleans, and at the time was one of the youngest mayors ever of a major United States city, as well as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He's been a tireless advocate for equality in the United States and someone we can learn a lot from. And so, without any further ado, unless there is a technical issue, I would like to present to you Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League. Apparently, there's a bit of a technical delay. I'm sorry. We're working out the feed from Mark, and he should be with us shortly. Journalism, I know that dead air time is wasted time, so I apologize for this. We will be getting Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League, on with us as soon as we can work out some of the technical issues that are going on. But again, as Adam mentioned, we have a great panel coming up that will discuss some of these issues in depth. And it certainly is something that we as a board of the U.S. network are concerning ourselves with, both in the makeup of our own board, but as well as the distribution of who's represented amongst our members. So we look forward to engaging with you more on this subject in the days, weeks, and months ahead as we form our agenda for the new year. I think I'm hearing that we're close to getting Mark on board, so that's good. And I would encourage any of you, if you have any suggestions or thoughts for the U.S. network and how it engages with its membership community, to check out our new website, as well as some of the programming that we're offering in the upcoming months. And I understand Mark will be with us momentarily. He missed all the great things I said about him, but hey, that's okay. He knows who he is. I'd also like to mention the fact that we are hiring and the UN Global Compact Network USA staff. Adam Gordon is our lone employee at this point in time, but we're hoping to help to build up our network. And there's actually a position out that's posted for a program coordinator on our website. So if there are those out there that are interested, please check that out, as we have a full complement of events and other programs that we're looking to support over the course of the next several months. I understand that Mark can see us and is watching us, but I've been asked to let him know that there is a backstage link that will get him into the speakers area so that we can have him present. We suspect that he may have gone in through the link that folks utilize to view this session. Sorry for those of you who are joining late. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties getting Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League, to join us. I believe that we're going to move to the panel in just another minute or so. We're just going to give Mark one more opportunity to see if he can link in through the backstage access point. And otherwise, I will ask Adam Roy Gordon to join us back and to introduce our panel. But we've all become a lot more adept at technology, but we're also a lot more susceptible to technology because there's more that we've got to master over the course of the last several months. So I am very pleased that we're able to move forward.
Rick, you're doing great. You know, this is just the challenges of doing this virtually. Mark is having some connection difficulties. And so I'm going to ask if Kofi with Atama and James could ask to share their audio and video so we could get started with that. And then when Mark is able to join us, we'll cut to him, stop the panel and let him speak, because I do know he has a time commitment that will restrain him from speaking after the panel. So we'll have a first session of the panel and a second session of the panel if we're able to, and we'll figure it out. Let's see, Atama, are you able to share your video?
Adam, I'd just like to say thanks and good luck to the panel. I will take you. You won't have to see my grinning face from now on. So thanks, and I'm looking forward to the panel and Mark's keynote at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Kofi able to join? Okay, I think I will go off, James. If you could start with Atama, do the nice one-on-one, and we'll get Kofi on, we'll get Mark on, and we'll pray to the technology gods that this works out. But I know that Atama is fantastic, and this conversation is very welcome, and it's worth starting now. James, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Looking forward to this discussion, necessarily a panel discussion. But thank you, Adam. Thank you, Rick, for your opening remarks. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on what part of the world that you're in. My name is James from Beltane. I'm part of the HR team here at the Global Compact, handling all HR responsibilities, part of the team. I'd like to welcome everyone to the United Business Live Equity Inclusion for the SDG discussion. As we know, with the social unrest and demonstrations over the past few months, not only in America, but around the world, employees are asking their employers.
Just popped off.
Mark, welcome.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can, sir.
Oh, I can't see you guys. Can you see me?
Yes, sir, we can see you.
Oh, okay.
So actually, Mark, I would like what I can do
I'm
right
here.
now. Yes, Mark, you're there. What I can do is do a hard pause. I will turn it over to you.
Okay.
I don't have your introductions in front of me.
Richard,
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Mark, go for it, Mark. Take it away.
Let me just first of all, let's apologize for the technology gods that we're not perfect this time. I did hear Richard's introduction. Thank you, Richard, for the generous introductions. And I'm honored to be with everyone today from all across the globe. We are truly a global community, no matter where we are. And I'm proud to speak to you all today. Let me begin by saying the following. 10 years ago, the National Urban League was tasked by its board with embarking on a new strategy. Our new strategy, in preparation for our new strategy, we studied the United Nations Sustainability Goals. And as a result, we adopted 5 goals of our own to guide our work here in the United States, inspired by the United Nations Sustainability Goals. And we affirmatively stated our objectives for our community here in the United States. And I'll just choose one of the goals just to illustrate. And that goal is that every American hold a good job that pays a livable wage with good benefits. So we, in each of the areas we work, jobs, education, health, housing, and justice, we affirmatively state what we want. So I wanted to say that. Let me just take a few minutes because I know because of the technological difficulties, time was pressed to share this. We are living in a time of not only an American crossroads, but of a global crossroads. The COVID pandemic, which has affected, I believe, every nation on earth with the exception of Iceland, has truly been, number one, an unpredictable event, but also an event that has altered the way so many people have had to live. As, if you will, compelled responses from government, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, our health experts. It's required a response from our technology experts. And what it's done here in the United States, and I know across the globe, it has further exposed the economic and social inequalities that are reality not only here in the United States, but all over the world. Could we call it a wake-up call? Well, many of us who are participating in this conversation today, it isn't a wake-up call because we've been woke about these tremendous challenges for a very long time. For many who have been indifferent or unconcerned or believing that we had overcome many of these great challenges and divisions, it has been indeed a wake-up call. And here in the United States, I like to define what we're dealing with as 4 pandemics. It's the pandemic of COVID, which has exposed the inequities in the American healthcare system because African Americans and Latinos and American Indians and Native Americans have died at a greater rate, have been ill at a greater rate than white Americans. It's been the pandemic of economic, if you will, inequality, as millions of people have lost work. And while we once again in the United States see higher unemployment among peoples of color than we do among whites. But make no mistake about it, the economic pain has been felt by every single community. And that's the second pandemic. It is far, it is deep, it is wide, and its abatement is not certain in any time in the foreseeable future. And the third pandemic has been the pandemic of racial justice that we see in this country. It's manifested itself in the large numbers of young African American, mainly men, who've lost their lives either in police custody or as a result of police violence, with almost every one of those cases, with some exceptions, not yielding the accountability by the perpetrating officers. And then there's a fourth pandemic. That's a pandemic of the conscience, a pandemic of the soul, a pandemic of what lies deep within us. It's a pandemic of right and indeed wrong, and whether we can grapple with solving these challenges and these problems are not simply a matter of policy, a matter of economics, a matter of health. They are a matter of right and wrong. They are a matter of what kind of nation we want to live in, what kind of world we want to live in. One thing that's been interesting has been the awakening in the business sector in the United States, with many American corporations, many business leaders reaching out for conversations, with indeed the Business Roundtable, which is one of America's leading business organizations, undertaking a process to confront these challenges through a number of task forces that they have created. It's been an interesting awakening. And for those of us who've been advocates, who've been in civil society, in the NGO space, have been civil rights leaders, so much of what we ask is, will the moment of widespread protest, the moment of new activism, will that moment become a long-term movement in this country for this sort of transformative change that indeed we need? We are not unmindful of the fact that every step towards progress yields resistance. It yields resistance from divisive politicians. It yields resistance from institutions for whom change is difficult. We know that we will face resistance in doing this here in the United States. But I haven't seen any time in the recent past the coming together in this country. If you witnessed the protests that have taken place, it was a beautiful tapestry, a mosaic of all of the races and generations of the United States out there peacefully protesting. Whites and blacks and Latinx and Asian and Native Americans. You've seen old and you've seen young. You've seen children and you've seen seniors. On the leadership side, you've seen responses by politicians. You've seen responses by business leaders, responses by NGO leaders. That points to a hope that this will transform itself from a moment indeed to a movement. All I can say on the global front, I believe that whether it's in the United States or whether it's globally, that the elimination of poverty and the ability for all of us to create a quality of life for all of our people is the biggest challenge we face, whether you live in the public sector, whether you work in the private sector, or whether you are in the NGO world. A nation like ours, a world abundant of resources, technology, intelligence, and wealth, has to have a North Star, has to have a goal to make sure that everyone can fully participate in that. And we cannot rest until that is the case. And that is the charge, and that is the cause. And important cause that should cross political boundaries, geographic boundaries, and should be infused in every public policy debate, whether it is about trade, whether it is about economic mobility, whether it's about technology. It ought to be infused and central to the debate. We've learned, for example, in the United States, that with the advent of a more technology-driven society, we've left many behind. For example, far too many of our children cannot participate in school remotely because they do not have a laptop computer. They do not have a tablet, or their homes or their buildings where they live are not connected to high-speed broadband. We must fix that. We must make that a very important cause, lest we allow technology to not lessen inequality, but heighten and exacerbate and increase inequality. And so it is just one example. So this has to be central to where we are, to our work, and to our collaborations. So today, as you all discuss and begin to understand, I do want to lift up and elevate the important role that business can play, and also indicate that this is not one sector versus the other sector. This is the need for there to be meaningful partnerships with the public sector, the private sector, and the NGO sector. And within that, there's tension. Within that, there's friction. Within that, there's debate. Within that, there's discussion. But no sector can claim that they can do it by themselves. No sector can claim that they have all the answers, but each must contribute fully to this important ultimate goal. And it is about people, and it is about quality of life, and it is about the dignity of human beings, the dignity of cultures, the dignity of people who've been locked out and left out for far too long. So it's our very, very important work here in the United States. The National Urban League is one of America's largest, and I think most important and most impactful civil rights NGOs. We will be on the front line of this work and of this effort. In fighting against racial justice, we're leading the way with many others to create new policies and new laws when it comes to policing and when it comes to criminal justice. We're on the front lines in saying that the response by our government with respect to the economic downturn must be broad, must be deep, must be significant. We're saying to the private sector the very same. Your response has to be broad, it has to be deep, it has to be specific, it has to be particular. And this is where we are, and we will continue to be a voice to encourage this, because it is about those who have been locked out, indeed, and left out. So I appreciate your attention today. I know we got a late start due to my inability to navigate this technology, or the technology's inability to navigate me, one or the other. I apologize for being late, but I want to thank Richard for the great words in advance. I want to thank all of you all today, and appreciate all of the panelists standing by while I could offer just a few thoughts this afternoon. Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much, sir. It was definitely worth the wait.
Thanks, James.
It was definitely worth the wait to hear your thoughts. And as you mentioned, and as you mentioned, it takes all sectors to accomplish this goal. And we're lucky enough we have two people from various sectors who can kind of give us some background on what they've been doing and help to accomplish this. You know, equity is being at the heart of our SDG ambitions. We like to have an open discussion about what's being done, what can we do, how can U.S. companies play a role in this effort. With that being said, I know I'm truly honored to have the following folks join us today. Kofi Apinto, President and CEO of African American Institution, is joining us. And joining Mr. Pinto on this important discussions, Otima Urichi, Vice President of Global Engagement and Head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee at Project Management Institution. Panelists, thank you for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just get right into it. I think Mark has set the tone of what we want to accomplish today. So, Athema, let me start with you. Many companies have begun to invest in equity inclusion in response to the recent events of social unrest over the past few months. And particularly, what is your organization is doing? Like, what actions are being done? And better yet, who's involved in those actions?
That's a great question. So it's everyone, right? So it really started, obviously, with the events that occurred. And as you know, at the heart of the Project Management Institute is our volunteers. We call them our secret sauce. And they kept reaching out and indicating, what can we do? And our CEO, Sunil Prashar, said, we can do more. And so a group formed, as you mentioned, our steering committee, and we decided, what does doing more mean to us? Now, I know as a Black woman, as a mother, I knew that I had to raise my hand to lead that group. And in leading that group, one of the things we wanted to do was to create the spaces to have those conversations and give the tools to be able to do that. But most importantly, is to be able to give the youth an opportunity. So we've been really working with our Global Executive Council companies, such as AstraZeneca and NASA and Johnson & Johnson, to help come up with an internship and shadowing program. Because as the Project Management Institute, we know that building skills gets that pipeline, gets you the talent that you need. And so in building those project skills are life skills. So regardless of what industry you want to be in, we believe that the project management skills are useful to you. And also to build those power skills, we're calling them. You know, before they used to be called soft skills.
Yeah,
but that's having like that innovative mindset, that growth mindset, being able to be mentored and mentorable and to be a collaborative leader. We wanted to teach that into the communities. And so what we're trying to do is to come up with shadow days, because one, it's about being aware of what's out there, right? So shadow someone. And then once you've done that, build some skills at the community college or at university levels, and then have the opportunity to have internships. And what our volunteers do well is they coach and mentor. So that's what we're doing in terms of our leaning in to do more.
Thank you, Athema. Kofi, the work you're doing with the African American Institute, talk a little about that, and what are you guys are looking to do to kind of take on this challenge that we have ahead of us and so forth?
Okay. Well, thank you, James. So I think it may be worth first kind of giving a little context here to how we decided what we were going to do. So we were founded by one of our co-founders was William Leo Hansberry, who was a pioneer probably the pioneer in the study in creating African studies in the U.S. And that was back in the 1940s and 50s. And if you look back at the founding of the UN, if you go look at the headlines in the newspapers, you will find that there was there's so many headlines about violence against African American communities. There were lynchings, there were rapes, there were murders, all aimed to terrorize Afro-descendants in the US. And in fact, the National Urban League and the NAACP made presentations before the UN way back then, right, to bring those issues to the world stage as a way of really trying to have changes occur here. When we looked back at our history, we found that in the late 60s, which was a parallel time in many ways, there were uprisings all around the country. Hundreds of US cities were beset with protest. We thought the best way we could try to get at some of the root causes of this was through education. Because in our analysis, a lot of this came from an assumption that kind of the highest form of being was this idea of whiteness, and that the lowest was African descendants, being Black. And part of this came from the fact that even Black children didn't actually know much about Africa, other than slaves came from there,
Sure.
and we were written out of history. So we thought that a root problem here was that we needed to engage with educators to help them do a better job of bringing young people into a much better understanding of the world. And so what we're doing now is we think that there's a new opportunity that we probably haven't seen in 50 years to really build on a lot of that work. And so that's what we're doing, is we're really focusing on that. And we're going to focus on K through 12 education. And our very first conference on the subject is going to be Friday, November 13, to kind of launch this initiative. We've already started a pilot in the state of Michigan, because Detroit, we think, is a wonderful place to build on this work based on some of the historic relationships we have. And we're also doing a pilot in Mozambique, because, believe it or not, African children don't learn much about the role of Africa in the world and the achievements of Africans and African descendants.
Just one follow-up question, Kofi. Talk a little bit more. Why are you focusing on that K-12 population? Many folks can say, they are in a position to actually make change right away. I think a lot of people say, what are we getting from our investment? And the whole argument around what can they do for us? But so why are you really focused on the K-12, and kind of shed some light on that?
Yes, so if you look at what's been happening in the U.S. Academy in terms of research, it's been a sea change. Okay, if you go to any good university, a lot of the old stereotypes about African descendants, about Africa, there's more work needs to be done. There's been a big change. If you look at the materials that young children are exposed to, they are still, there's a disconnect between what's happened in the academy and what's actually available in the classroom. And so in trying to do your work in terms of strategy, you try to think of where you can make a difference. And because we have this history in this area, we think that this is a long-term problem, right? I started out talking about how even back in the 1940s, the UN was being petitioned on these issues, right? So we think that there's an opportunity for us to engage. Now, a lot of our work has shown us that young people in particular, of all persuasions, have a much greater interest in each other and about Africa and African descendants. So we think that you do get big payoffs by focusing on that, because you can actually sustain that. If people early enough change their understanding and have much more of a global perspective, we think that bodes well for the future.
Excellent, excellent. Fatima, I have one of the things before I arrived here at the Global Compact, I kind of navigated through the corporate world of HR. And one of the things I noticed was, one acronym I always remember was ROI, return on investment. And I always heard my business leaders say, well, James, what's the return on investment if we go down this route, whether it's training, whether it's education, things of that nature? So I propose the same question to you. What's the business proposition to invest resource in these efforts, within your organization, with stakeholders? And also to tell that, what are some of the challenges too? So why should businesses go there? And what are some of the challenges?
So that's a good question. And there's actually quite a bit of data out there that when you have cultural diversity in your leadership, you have much higher performance. I mean, and I have some great stats here. So, it's 85 versus 61% in terms of performance achieved if you have cultural diversity in your leadership. If you're looking at women, right? If you have women on your teams and stuff, in terms of high impact, you have 63% more high performance in that case. So I think that what happens is that when you have diverse teams, you get diversity of thought and experience, and that helps. If you think about within our world in the Project Management Institute, where we're focused on project professionals and people who take an idea and turn it into a reality, you need lots of people with different backgrounds, different experiences to lend their voice and their experience to be successful. So I think there's very clear ROI and benefit for all of the teams. And I think it's also really important that you think about the enabling, elements of it. You had asked me earlier about some of the things we're looking to do. So our goal is to kind of work collectively. Obviously, we have a large network. We've got over 300 chapters. We've got over 600 members, and that network, we want to empower them. And there's kind of that multiplier effect. They work in their communities, and they impact change. And so one of the things that our program is hoping to do is to equip them. So we have microsites. We're giving our chapters, sort of these toolkits that they can have those difficult conversations, bring those up, but also to have the assets to facilitate that unconscious bias training. What can you do so that, because we all inherently have some level of bias.
Absolutely.
But if you address it, you're able to see and have the empathy that you need to work. And I think one of the key terms in this whole thing, it's about inclusion, right? Someone once said in one of our meetings, one of our board people, it's about being able to pull up a seat at the table, right? So that the table, everyone is welcome and everyone feels a sense of belonging. That's what we want to create. And in that, once you create that, you get the best of everyone. And when you get the best of everyone, the numbers that I just mentioned can even be higher. You get much greater ROI if you're getting the best of everyone.
Mm-hmm. But James, if I could just add to that, because I agree with it completely. So if you're going to think about return on investment, we all know that short term is meaningless, right? When you look at return on investment, you have to look at longer periods of time. That's what really good companies, when you look at what they do over time and what they can sustain. So they've got to make investments that enable them to be successful for the long term, right? And so I just couldn't agree more with what you said, and I just wanted to support it with that.
You guys hit the nail on the head. It's kind of like, I like to say, it's kind of like growing your own food. You got to fertilize the ground, you have to water it, you have to take care of it. It won't grow overnight. If it does, then it probably won't be healthy for you to eat it. It does take some effort and time. But I know a lot of people in these calls are from companies within the U.S. and maybe some outside subsidiaries. And I guess some of the things are saying, like, what are some of the barriers that you're hearing? So when these people hear those same barriers, we're able to equip them to kind of say, okay, yes, we hear this, but you should be doing this. What's some of the, when you guys started to roll out these programs, what are some of the things that you were hearing that kind of in your mind is like, okay, they're really not invested into it, so we can better prepare those folks who are on this panel discussion to get a better idea of what's expected ahead of them? And
go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Pinting.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a few different ways to look at this. So when you're looking within your own organization, or whether you're working in an organization or on the board of an organization, or you're a major customer, I think you need to see commitment from the very top. So that means the board has to really be really clear with everybody that this is important, right?
Sure.
And that the board has thought about it and believes it's important to the long-term success of the company. That then gives the senior leadership team the room, right? And also they know that if they want to be seen as performing well, this is one of the metrics that they're going to have to deliver on. And I think there's always got to be a really specific conversation about what's realistic, what are the opportunities in particular context, And in different organizations, the opportunities vary, and in different countries, they vary, right?
Sure.
So, diversity means very different things in parts of Africa and in the US, right? But the goal is the same, right? Is to really have that equity and inclusion. And I think the staff of an organization seeing that kind of leadership from the board and the leadership team needs to feel that they won't be kind of punished, right, for being open and honest and engaging, right? So there are aspects to equity and inclusion that I would submit are challenges for everybody. Nobody's perfect on this. There is no company you can look at and say, oh, they figured it all out, they're doing it all well. It's a process, right? And it's something you strive to keep on doing better at, honestly, and you make it something that everybody can get behind, which means that sometimes when people maybe don't understand how to talk about something in the right way, but maybe the intention, right, is good, you don't make it hard for them, right, to be open. So there's a lot of factors, which, we have limited time here, but I really do think it starts with the board and that leadership team being on the same page and rowing in the same direction.
No, you're absolutely right. It starts at the top. But Timo, before I turn to you to hear your feedback on it, I just want to let folks know who are on this session that the chat room is open. If you have questions you'd like to present to the panelists, I'll try my best to actually moderate the session and also keep an eye on the chat that's going on. So yes, if you have any questions for the panelists, please, we want this to be interactive. And we're here, and basically we want to hear what your thoughts are and how can we help you. That being said, Timo, I'll turn it over to you and your thoughts of where it starts.
Yeah, so I echo exactly what Mr. Apinting was saying, is that it does start from the top. But what we've seen at the Project Management Institute is that it also is at the heart where it's the people, right? And so at that place where we have a whole history, 50-year organization where volunteerism is so key to the success. It's what we call our secret sauce. And so when this issue came and our CEO, Sunil Pashara, said, let's lean in and do more, you really saw a groundswell. And I think it's going to stick and be sustained because the people are bought in, right? And it's not that it's easy. It's not that the conversations will be, they'll be challenging. And we're all on this journey, but because we're owning it, I think that's what makes it really exciting, because you have the volunteers. So as I said, I have a day job, but I felt so passionate about the topic that I raised my hand to say, I want to lead this and I want to pull together the teams, and we want to come up with a great idea. So I think that momentum. So if in an organization you can have that volunteer strength, and then if you've got an extension and you say, hey, how about we partner? So I think that's also something that we've learned that's worked really well, is that doing this in partnership with, we're fortunate to have a global executive council, which has a lot of leading organizations, and they've come together with us and said, hey, you know what, together we can do more. We can have a much more effective internship program when a prospective person has multiple companies in which they could possibly intern at, right? So we're not just doing it alone. So what I would add is that it's really important to have that energized group of volunteers within your organization, but also don't be afraid to partner, because you can learn a lot and then you can amplify what's really important by being in partnership.
No, Tima, absolutely. I have one follow-up question for Tima. Again, I'm taking off my not-for-profit hat and putting my corporate HR hat back on again. And the question is, how do you measure success? And I guess people are asking, if we're doing something, what is successful? So how are you, and Kofi, I'll turn that over to you as well. But Tima, how are you guys measuring what's successful? Did we reach our benchmarks, things of that nature?
So we definitely have set some targets for ourselves within our own organization.
Sure.
And we're beginning, and those measures are around, sort of impact. How can we assess that we've been impactful? Of course, you can look at how many clicks you have on your websites and stuff, but we've tried also something which we call like listening sessions, where we're going to take a baseline, we're going to hear what the challenges and issues are, and then we're hoping to address them, and then we can have subsequent listening sessions. So we're hearing directly from our staff around what are the issues, what's concerning them, and then the interventions that we do, and then what comes after that. In terms of the internship programs and our shadow days and stuff, obviously those measures are around how many individuals do you really impact and touch, and you can measure it in those ways. So those are some of the ways that we're looking to measure the impact of the programs that we're putting in place.
Sir.
Number of ways to answer this question. So let me first start with how maybe a board thinks about this. As an organization, look at where you may well have a really diverse board, or you may not. If you don't, right, and you really have a lot of work to do there, I would suggest that be the initial focus, right? And that is something you can set goals for, and you can measure progress over time. If the organization is challenged more on the staff side, that's something one can also do. And just if the board is interested and is getting reports on these things, it really drives management activity because they want to do better and achieve more. You can also look at where your organization spends money.
Sure.
So in philanthropy, that's who are your grantees. In business, you want to see who your customers are, who your vendors are, right? Who you work with. When you get big opportunities to make big investments, don't go through the usual process. Sure. And come up with the usual suspects, but really open it up. And you can judge yourself very, very specifically on that. So I'm answering that in the kind of general question of how one shows progress on DEI. I just want to be sure that's the question you were really asking.
Yep. Yes, definitely. As you guys were talking, I thought it makes sense to kind of check the chat and see what questions people are asking. And actually, I came across one very interesting question. Question is, how can a change happen when the boardroom is not diverse itself?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I'm happy.
I didn't say it was going to be easy, guys.
Yeah. I think that if a board is willing to acknowledge that, right, then there's an opportunity for there to be change, right? So if a board is not diverse, right, and is not really the right mix of people for the organization, and they realize that, then you can actually start to have those conversations. If it's a big problem and they don't recognize it, I think one can count on our really energetic civil society to start to bring this up in ways that a company actually has to deal with. And there are countless examples of this where companies have realized that they do need to be responsive to these voices, and that they can't avoid these issues if they really want to have a license to operate. And everybody depends on various communities of people to be successful in whatever enterprise they're involved in. So those are difficult situations if there's no acknowledgement. But sometimes the boards that are least diverse try the hardest, right? Once you can persuade them that this is important for the success of the business, then I've seen it happen and been quite dramatic. And it's often taken a crisis, but coming out of that crisis, we can all think of the examples where companies have over, let's say, 10 years, totally changed the way they look and the way they operate.
You're right. People don't change for the sake of change, and sometimes sometimes you need some pain and suffering in order for those changes to happen. Well, Tima, I toss that same question to you. What are your thoughts when the board is not diverse and people are struggling to make sense of this?
Well, I would say that, it's definitely something that I think boards are looking at and saying, how can we, if you look at someone like the Project Management Institute, I mean, we're a global organization, and there has been a lot of effort over the years to diversify the board, in terms of gender and regional representation. So I think the first step is to be conscious of it, and then to seek, candidates who can meet those needs that are first and foremost strong board candidates, and then also have some diversity on the board as well. So that's what I would say.
Excellent. And you're right. Again, if they don't realize this is a problem, then the problem probably won't get solved until you realize that we do have a problem on our hands. Right. I guess on that note, the way I look at this is bigger than simply about diversity and equity inclusion, but it's very much about creating a more equitable and sustainable world, along with the SDGs. And that's why we're here. Mm-hmm. How do these issues tie into the larger sustainable issues from your perspective, especially when we have these many goals that are out there and we're trying to tackle all these things at one time? How does this equity and inclusion kind of fits into the framework of the whole SDG? And I guess I'll turn it over to you as well as, that one. And I'll jump to you, Kofi, in a minute.
Sure. So, I mean, if you think about projects, right? I mean, a large amount of what projects are is to change, right? Sure. A lot about what we do as project professionals or with change makers. And I think what you're trying to do with the UN Sustainable Goals is to make change a reality, right? And so what we believe is that if you empower a cross-section of people, you empower them with the skills and the capabilities, they can be much more effective at the change. And that's why I think that it links into that sustainability. It's a really important thing. And so skilling up diverse populations brings more people to the table who can affect change, who can have creative ideas that transform our world. And that's the position that we sort of look at it as. It's like my organization, myself, our teams, we're empowering people. We're building skills, we're building capabilities, both technical as well as their power skills, so that they can make the changes within, whether it's in the commercial sector, in the civil society, no matter where they're going to be, so that they can have impact, right? So it puts it on that continuum. Build the skills, empower the people, affect the change. That's how I see it. And that's what makes the sustainability.
Totally agree with you. Sir, Mr. Pink, your thoughts?
Yeah, so Jane, I think you make a very good point. If we make changes that heal and improve our society, but we don't do things to heal and improve the planet, then we really are not thinking broadly enough. And I think that one can't really separate people and planet if one's interested in well-being. They're all connected. And one of the, I think, opportunities for the countries of a continent like Africa is that the world has done a really bad job on sustainability, right? There's been huge economic degradation, and the ecologies of many parts of the world have really been ravaged. It's not too late for some of these countries, and for the most of them, and there's a lot of opportunity for really great ideas and new practices to come into being and to be demonstrated, for example, on the African continent. So I don't think one can separate these two things. One has to work on both of them. And one of the things one has to look at as an organization is to do an honest accounting. How much are you helping to improve things and how much are you the problem? And if you're exacerbating the environment, some of the environmental challenges, then it makes no sense for you to continue on that pathway.
You're absolutely, you both are absolutely correct. I guess the question I have next for the both of you, and Mr. Pender, you talked about it earlier. You mentioned something that struck a chord with me. We had these same conversations back in the 60s. The U.S. was going through this. And also look at, and one of the things, I hear a lot from this generation of workforces, why is this time different, the period of time that we're going through? We have a lot of people who might be skeptical and say, well, we had Baltimore. Then a couple of years later, we had Ferguson. Now we have Minneapolis. So the question is, it seems like we go through this whole cycle, to me, is that we wash, repent, we wash, rinse, and repeat. We kind of end up back in the same place we are in another 3 or 4 years, and we get reminded. But this time, this movement seems a little different. Let's get your thoughts on it. What's happening now that didn't happen maybe in the 60s or maybe 10 years ago or maybe 5 years ago? Or is there a difference? Sir? Yes.
I think Mark Morial pointed out some of the ways in which today is different, right? And I agree with many of those observations. I would say, though, it's far too early to know if it's going to be different in terms of making a difference, right? These things take real time.
Sure.
And it's not clear to me yet that we have the evidence to say that this time the outcomes will be better than they were the last time this was so much at the forefront. And that's true, I think, on the using a racial equity lens, using a gender lens, and also looking at the environment, right? So these things won't be different unless we can really sustain it, which means that all of our organizations have to have medium and long-term plans that really require them to improve on these things. That's the only way we can kind of collectively change. So I'd say the jury is still out on whether this is going to end differently than some of the other times we've been in. But I think Mark Morial did point out some encouraging signs, right? It's broader. Younger voices, I think, are thinking about these things in refreshingly new ways and don't have a lot of the hang-ups that maybe my generation and generations before me had. So I think we're starting from a better potential place, but the jury's still out. We have a long ways to go. This is not going to happen overnight.
No, you're absolutely right. Your thoughts, please, ma'am.
Yes, I think in every period you have momentum and movement, right? There's something that causes us to have a bit of momentum around a particular issue, and we, on the shoulders of our ancestors, continue to move to the next level, right? So I think in this period, each time that, you have people either protesting or you have people volunteering or you have people sharing and allyship, we move further towards that ultimate goal, right? So the SDG is about, ending those inequalities. Are we there yet? No, but we're certainly in flow. We're certainly moving in the right direction. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on, is getting more and more people in the conversation, a broader, more diverse, as Mr. Morial said earlier, group of people thinking about it, talking about it, and most importantly, doing things about it. And I think we've pointed out stuff that organizations can do, whether it's you're volunteering, you're having conversations, you're doing mentoring, you're coaching, and you're building that next generation, that next sense of capability, and really sparking that idea and then moving it forward and creating the reality that we all want to see. So I think I'm excited, and I think our teams that we're working with are quite excited. We know that there's lots of work more to do, absolutely. But we also believe that we have momentum, and we're in an incredible season of change. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think I piggyback off of that. I think part of it too, it's a global movement.
Exactly.
In the past, we had, in the U.S., we had protests in major cities and things of that nature. But I've been on this planet probably a little longer, about 5 decades, and I remember it's the first time I recall seeing folks up in arms in the UK, folks up in arms in South America, folks up in arms in New Zealand about what's going on in equity and diversity. So you're absolutely right. I think this time is more of maybe that's to do with technology. As Kofi mentioned earlier, with the latest in technology, they didn't have Twitter back in the 60s or social media, things of that nature. I don't think they have video cameras back in the 60s, but okay. So a lot of it has to do with the current technology that we have. But I guess to take it back to the organizations, how can companies empower individual change makers to drive transformation efforts within their organization and with their stakeholders? Sir, Kofi.
It comes down to culture, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a culture that encourages that or not? If you don't, then people with those skills, right, and that kind of orientation will not stay, and after a while they won't be attracted to where you're coming from. So to me, it comes down to the culture being one that encourages and allows that to flourish.
Absolutely. You're right. It's all about the culture. Fatima, please, your thoughts.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's the culture, and also creating, you have the culture, but you want to be able to create sort of that enabling environment, right? So that it says, hey, you've got this great idea around. And if you think about it as an organization,
Yes.
One of the things that we're focused on, and as I said, you want to have a clear goal. So we've picked on the this kind of internship, but it's around the whole journey, because what happens a lot of times is maybe there'll be mentoring, maybe there'll be coaching, maybe there'll be some shadow days, but can you have a holistic program that really addresses all the issues, all the barriers that prevent you from having that talent pipeline that you're thinking about, right? So are you exposing people? Do you have the opportunity for them to understand what roles are available, what skills are required? And then once they get that, are you supporting the development of those skills, and then the internships, and then the coaching, and then when the individual is in role, to continue to support? So I think it's very important to have not just the short term, let's do a volunteer program, but to have that short, medium, and long-term view in mind, that you have a culture that says, this is an important issue. I'm going to take it from its, sort of the genesis of it all the way to the end. And I think that's something we've learned with our partners, that if you partner with others, you can then, where you're strong and maybe where they're weak, you can come together and you can formulate a program that really is impactful. And so that's what we're learning, and that's what we're putting in place.
Absolutely. With that being said, I am looking at some of the questions that are starting to come in. I think a lot of those questions I'm seeing talks about, building pipelines, how do we get a diverse board, things of that nature, and I think we addressed those throughout this discussion. So with that being said, we have about 6 minutes left. So what I want to do is to split the time in half and give each one of you about 2 to 3 minutes. And then as a parting shot, what do you want people to walk away with from this session? Tima, I'll start with you first.
Thank you. So what I want you to walk away from this session is that this is the time to do more, right? And we've got great momentum. And let's break it down into what is it that you can do? So what I want to leave you with is that create that culture within your organization that allows people to say, I want to do more, and give them the tools to be able to do it. And I think anchor it around, if you will, a hero project, something that you can really focus on and have clear ROI and real impact in your community. Let me give you an example about some of the things that the Project Management Institute is doing. So
Sure.
we are deciding that starting on International Project Management Day, which is November 5th, through to December 5th, which is International Volunteer Day, we really want to support diverse organizations and volunteer with them. So through that month of service, I know some of you might have heard that last year we did, and that was the year we joined the compact, we did 150,000 hours across the globe with organizations. And so this year we're saying we want to have a focus on looking at diverse organizations who are focusing on race and other ethnicities, et cetera, and really support them in a concerted way. But then we want to take that further again. And then after that month of service, what else can we do? Can we support an internship program? Can we support shadowing days? And so I think it's really important to create the culture, then give the tools, and then you're going to see the impact that you want to see. So that would be my parting, is to take that idea and turn it into a reality.
I just have one follow-up question, and Kofi, I promise I'll turn it over to you for enough time to get your 3 minutes in. When you talk, and I'm a firm believer, you need to get out into communities, you need to get volunteers, things of that nature. But given the current health situation, and we talk about volunteers, people stop actually leaving their place, volunteering at an organization, things of that nature.
You'll be surprised at how much virtual
Yes.
mentoring and coaching. So I'm currently doing some virtual coaching. In fact, I have
That's what I try to
mentees.
get out of you, yes.
Exactly. I have mentees in 3 different countries on 3 different continents, right? And I mentor and coach them. We have Zoom sessions. So you can still coach, you can still mentor, you can still spark that, excitement and enthusiasm in a young person. And sometimes we have difficulty with the technology. I have a young man in Nigeria, and so we'll do WhatsApp sometimes, and sometimes we can do Zoom or whatever it is that we can do. I want to make that connection with him, and I give him a plan, and I share with him all the things he can be as a project manager. So I think it's possible, even in the pandemic, to reach beyond your current environment and give someone that helping hand.
Absolutely. Sir, I'll turn it over to you for the last 3 minutes.
I don't think I'll take all 3.
Okay.
I think for me, what's important is we stop compartmentalizing things like this and start to integrate them holistically in our everyday lives, and which include the work that we do. And this is not going to work. It's not going to be successful if on a board agenda, DEI is one item, like item number 10, right? In a board meeting. It's got to be integrated into what you do. If you're serious about it and it's really important for your success, then it's part of everything you do. And I think for too long, we see this kind of division between, well, here's what we have to do to be successful. And nonprofits, I think, are, face the same challenge, right? They're focusing on what they need to do to keep the lights on, right? As do for-profit businesses who have to do the same thing. And we delink them, and we try to think of what we can do to afford to be able to do these other things. And that kind of thinking, I think, gets us nowhere. So we've got to get serious. We've got to think holistically and bring this into all that we do. If we do that, then I think we have a good chance for success. If we don't, we'll be saying, well, times are tough now. We got to stop worrying about the environment. We got to stop worrying about racial equity. We got to survive. And I think that ends up with a kind of a race to the bottom. The other thing is, I think we haven't really talked about but there's a real role for policy here, because most organizations are in some kind of competitive environment, right? It's very different depending on the kind of institution you are, but there's some competitive dynamics for people, for opportunities, for influence, etc. I think that if we don't have rules so that it's a level playing field, right? It's not going to be sustainable, right? You can't have it where you choose to disadvantage yourself in some ways, and others choose not to. We would argue in the long term you're going to be more successful, but that's not really realistic in the world we live in, right? Where you have short-term pressures and long-term pressures. And if you're not taking care of some of the short-term things, you don't get to actually do some of the long-term things. So I do think that we have to agree on rules and norms that everybody has to live up to. And then I think we can all move together in the same direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. So that being said, Otima Urenchi, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking part of this conversation. Your insight, your thoughts, just what we needed is definitely on point. Mr. Kofi Pinting, thank you, sir. The work you've done over the years speaks volumes. And, I appreciate your time and effort in joining us. Adam, I think we've been pretty blessed to have these two panelists. And at this point now, I want to thank you both for joining us. The conversation is just starting. There's more we can be doing. I'm sure the colleagues on this call will probably be reaching out to the various one of us and getting more detailed information. But we only have an hour. And I think this goes to start the conversation, not end it. So hopefully this could trigger a bigger avalanche of waves of changes happening. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us for the last 50 minutes. Hope you find this as entertaining and thoughtful as I have. With that being said, Adam, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Perfect. James, I also would like to thank you. Being able to take you out of your HR perch at the UN Global Compact and put you on stage is something that we're very pleased to be able to do. This topic, this conversation amidst the 75th UN General Assembly and our very large virtual event, Uniting Business Live, I think is a very important conversation to have. But of course it is, as James said, just scratching the surface. I would like to again thank all of our speakers today, from our board chair, Rick Pearl, Mark Morial, the National Urban League, Otema, Kofi, our panelists, as well as James, our moderator. What I was really hoping we would get across today is that the conversations that we have around the SDGs include all levels of progress we need to make as a planet, and for the US and the US network, the progress that we need to make as a country. And we should be thinking about these issues in the context of the SDGs. And we at the US network really do look forward to continuing to support these conversations under that umbrella of the SDGs, specifically on the role that US business can play. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, if you're a member of Network USA and want to help us along our journey to supporting our members, I do welcome you to reach out as well. But with that, I will thank all of you for joining us and leave you to explore the other great virtual sessions here today. Thank you very much, and then have a wonderful day and rest of your UN General Assembly week.